I'm Stephen Pruett, Executive Chairman of Cox Media Group.
What inspired you to get into the media field?
When I was in high school, there was a local radio station that I used to drive by. When I would be out and about, I would see this little radio station. And one day I stopped in there, and it was owned, it was a little Class A FM down in the next town over, actually, in Columbia, Illinois. And it was owned by a couple, and they were just in there making local radio and all kinds of kooky stuff, from German polka music to, talking to the neighbors. It just was a little brick building. It was, and they had built it. It, probably looked like a garage from the outside, sort of, but it was a radio. I can't remember the call letters, but I thought, wow, this town has a radio station and these people are making radio. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then I got interested in the idea of like radio. And I went to Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville that had a radio TV program. And I began to learn about the radio business. And that was what started it.
And after that, can you tell me a little bit about your media journey?
Well, I went to school and I was a little bit ahead of myself. I wanted to be on the radio, and I really wanted to be on the college station, which I was, and then on SIU's radio station. And I think we had a real radio station, but we also had a campus, carrier wave station. And I was on both of those. And then I got a chance I was writing articles about music, and I was freelancing, and I got some articles in a magazine called Concert News. And the result of that was interviews that I taped. And then I met somebody from the rock radio station in St. Louis, KSHE, and they said, why don't we put these interviews and let's edit them and put them on the air? You have the tapes, you have a release. I think I had a release. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But back then, people didn't care so much about that stuff. It was different. It was underground radio. It was FM radio. And so I started doing these interview shows. I would do the interviews for the magazine. And, I interviewed Freddie Mercury, Styx, REO Speedwagon, Frank Zappa. I'm just a kid. I was 19 or 20. And these people sat down with me, and, Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, Christine McVie, all of Fleetwood Mac, when Bob Welch was in the band, and then later when Buckingham Nicks were in the band. So I thought, this is great. I can just, I'm getting to talk to these people. And I was a terrible interviewer. I was untrained. I didn't know anything, but I just get people talking, and then the radio station would cut it up and I was just writing it. I was writing an article, so it didn't matter what it sounded like, but the radio station would cut it up and make it into something and put songs between it. And we ran it on KSHE. It ran on KSHE. I also got a part-time DJ job there, and that was it. And so I really wasn't very good at any of those things. I was very young, untrained, and I also swept the floors and wiped off people's desks. And but I met these salespeople, and I always thought, wow, look at their, they had nice clothes and they had nice cars and they got to come and go. And I thought, and I asked somebody, I said, what do those people do? And they said, oh, they're salespeople. So I kind of remembered that. And then I got a job in a TV station in the promotion department. And I sort of brought some of my radio skills, what little I had learned along. And I was like the number 3 person in a 3-person department. And promotion already isn't, you're sort of downhill from all the action. You're kind of telling about the action. But I got to work with news people. I got to learn how to cut film and cut tape. And, back then those were and in St. Louis, those were union jobs. So I worked with union guys. And, I think people just, kind of almost felt sorry for me. I was just didn't know anything. And I would just ask people and people would show me stuff. And, it was because of that I learned some more skills. And miraculously, my promos got on the air. I was doing needle drop music on footage about our news using Queen and stuff like that. I can't believe they put it on the air. And we didn't have permission to use the music. But that was and that was an ABC affiliate in St. Louis, which in those days was the 12th market in the country. But the business was very, it was very rudimentary, right? And even back then, even with ABC, NBC, and CBS being in business, this was pre-Fox. You had independence. I had to go do ascertainment meetings, and I met a young guy that was young then. He was in his 30s, and but that was young in the business, and he was GM of the independent station. His name was Hal Pruett, and he said to me, "Hey, have you ever thought about going into sales?" And I said, "Oh, well, you'd have to be at least 35 to get into sales at Channel 2." And Mr. Hanson, that was the GM, would never put me in sales. And he goes, "Well, I'll put you in sales, and you go tell Ralph." He knew the other GM. So I did. I went and told Mr. Hanson. I said, "I ran into Hal Pruett at the ascertainment meeting. He wants to make me a salesperson." And he goes, "You know what? Go ahead." It was like, he was nice about it, and I don't know, maybe back then everybody was just nicer. But Midwestern, a lot of nice people who wanted to open a door. And so I went to work for Hal and went as a salesperson, and then just kind of met more and more people. And I began. I remember I would get broadcasting in cable, and I would open the back of it, and there would be every week there'd be like an ad for a small radio station for sale in some small town, and I really wanted to own a small radio station, and it just was my dream. And so I started learning about business, and being a salesperson, you're calling on people's businesses.
Yeah.
So you learn business, and I tried a bunch of different things, ad agency, I started an ad agency with another guy who was a photographer, and, we did ads for people. And, one thing led to another, and somebody told me I should be a national rep, and I went to MMT, and I went to Petrie Television in St. Louis, which was a rep firm. It's gone now. It was consolidated up into, ironically, I think Blair bought Petrie. CMG owned a rep firm up until a couple of years ago, and we'd acquired a whole bunch of other rep firms. But I was in the rep business then in St. Louis, and then I did well, and I was aggressive, and back then that was a good strategy for sales, to go ask for the order and ask for more share. And I learned, Petrie sent me to New York. I'd never been out of St. Louis, really, the St. Louis area, and they sent me to New York and trained me for about a month. And that really taught me a lot about business. And then I started studying business, and I later went back to school and got an MBA. I had left my undergraduate studies because I told the head of the department, he was telling me I had to do all these general studies I didn't want to do. I just wanted to take radio TV classes. Right. And I said, well, I've got a job in radio, and if you knew anything, you would have a job in radio. He didn't take kindly to that, and I left shortly thereafter. And he said something to the effect, "Young man, I have to sign your degree, And he didn't mean to make me leave. It was my own impetuousness. And then, so I did, and I went down the road, and I was selling, and I was making commissions and making good money. and I went to Chicago, which is a great business city. And I started going to the library and reading books about business and finding books about business and finance and how to start a business. And I met a broker, a man named Howard Stason, and he would tolerate me sitting in his office asking about how to buy radio stations. And I didn't know anything. I just was a salesperson that had learned some finance and learned how to make a business plan. And a guy came in to Howard's office and had raised a limited partnership and wanted to buy some radio stations, but didn't have anybody to run it. And Howard recommended me, I think, to get me out of his office. And so I became this guy's partner in a couple of radio stations. And I drove around in my 20s. It was one was in Galesburg, Illinois, and one was in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago. And we got very lucky. We took a little local radio station in Arlington Heights, and we turned it into an FM country music station. They didn't exist much at the time. And we showed up in the Chicago book, and some guy came along and bought the radio station for double what we paid for it. And then that partnership kind of broke up, and I went on. He kept the man that backed me. He kept the other station, and I went on and started raising limited partnerships to apply for television licenses. And then I just learned more and more, and I could do this all day. I don't think you have all day, but until I became, I was able to say I was an owner, even though I only owned tiny fractions, and raised money and built stations. And in the 80s, I built, give or take, 20 television stations using limited partnerships from about 1982 to 1986. We built a bunch, and I built a company called UPI Media, which was kind of loosely affiliated with United Press International. And I had, in that time, I had learned how to become a consultant, and I'd learned financing and how to deal with banks. And, in about a decade, I had a crash course of business. And I went back then after the tax law changed, and I sold off some stations, and I was kind of starting my family. I went back and got my MBA at Northwestern, and then kind of launched another phase of becoming what I really amounted to of an investment banker. Early days in the 80s, when, as I always say to people owned TV and radio stations, not corporations, right? There were still a lot of individual owners. Consolidation was on the horizon. I got lucky. I got a piece of that. And, I did that up until, the 90s. And then, I just kind of kept stair-stepping that career along the way until the 2000s. I decided I wanted to actually, instead of being a deal maker and just get a piece of things, I wanted to actually be a part of a company and be a CEO. And I found a company that was over-levered and needed a financial guy, and I went into that, and that eventually, I was there 10 years. I took it through a bankruptcy. I took it through a couple of restructurings and a bankruptcy, became the CEO, went from CFO to CEO, and then we sold it successfully at a profit after we went through a Chapter 11 for the investors that came in. And then that landed me in David Smith's office at Sinclair looking for an investor. And of most improbable guy, why would he invest with me? But David is nothing if not open to some kind of different idea. And he did. He invested in me to start a company called Chesapeake, which then we merged into Sinclair. I did that 8 more years. And we bought more stations, and we're had a strategy, improved them, and then along my friend Brian Brady was selling his company to Apollo, and he wanted me to be a part of that. And it was all, I went to David again. I said, hey, these guys want me to go do this. He goes, well, let's, keep me posted. We'll see how that goes. He wanted me to stay. And, but when it came down to it, he agreed it was the right thing for me to do, to go do that. And so again, people generally, a lot of my career was maybe, I mean, people didn't, I gained the confidence of some influential people who opened doors for me, but then I ran through them and I did perform, right? And, everything from going back to being the lowest person in the radio station to the lowest person in a TV station, and then sales. And if I had to say there was a catalyst, it was learning sales, because sales let me learn every part of the business. And so becoming a really good seller and raising your hand about revenue, when somebody says, who wants to take charge of revenue? If you raise your hand, it's a lot of people don't want to do that, right?
Right.
Who wants to get new business? I'll go get new business. That really was something that Hal Protter instilled in me. He's passed on now, but that be aggressive, go get revenue, go talk to advertisers. We're helping their business. I always believed that with, everything I had, that was what I was doing. I was helping people build their business, and that paid off, right? That kind of positive outlook, positive attitude. Now I've skipped setbacks and failures, had lots of those. Definitely I, left the broadcast business for a while, wanted to start an auto parts company, lost all my money, had to rebuild, had to rebuild my whole career at 40 years old. That was challenging. And it's those things. But what I wanted when I started writing, when I started publishing, and I thought about publishing this book, it's not because I'm the richest guy and most successful guy in broadcasting. I've done okay. Guys like Perry Sook and David and Brian have all done incredible things. I mean, their accomplishments are fantastic. And but I have been at that table, and I've seen a lot, and I felt like, I might be uniquely positioned to share this with people, and share views with people who are at a point in their career where they need some encouragement or they need some insight, and maybe I can help. And that's, what motivates me today. We're not done here by any means at my day job.
Right.
I think I'll be here a bit yet. And by that, I mean a couple of years. I think I'll be here a couple more years. And I don't know what the future brings exactly, but a part of my future is going to be continuing to provide views from the top of corporations, because I feel like people, can benefit. A young person came to me, and she's outside the broadcast industry. She's in the retail business, and she runs a store for a retail chain that's growing. And she had all these big plans. And I said, she said, well, we're going to open some more stores, and I want to be over those stores. And I said, so, okay, what is your company thinking? And she goes, well, they're going to open more stores. And I said, no, what is your company thinking about what they are going to do? Because I promise you, they're thinking something. And she goes, what? I said, yeah, they're already thinking about this. So you're behind. You need to think, like, what are they thinking? Are they thinking about me? And if they're not thinking about you, you need to get on their radar screen, right? And she did. And she went, and right away, because she was going to wait, I'm going to wait, and I'm going to see what happens. I said, no, don't wait and see what happens. Get on their radar screen now that you're interested. because they may be thinking, for a variety of reasons, they may be totally happy with your work. They may think you're great, but they don't want to move you out of that store. They don't want to distract you. They don't want to make sure they understand that you not only could run your store, but you could run two more stores. And so she's going to get the job. But, it's just something simple as, what are the people up here thinking? When you're thinking this, what are they thinking? Are you aligned with the company? And if you're not in alignment with the company, can you get in alignment? And that the book goes into a lot of that in detail. It goes into everything about persistence, resilience, failure, loss. My sons unfortunately passed away. My youngest passed away, the youngest at 20, and my oldest, who was born with a congenital heart condition, passed away at 35. And that put both times, even though they were years apart, 15 years apart, that it put a perspective on things that you can fix anything in business. You can fix anything financial. You can, no matter how down and out, no matter how tough the situation, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the loss of a loved one, you can't fix. It's over. And you have to live with that in a way that doesn't destroy you and everybody else around you, right? I mean, you have to be strong in their memory. You have to be strong for your spouse or your family, your other survivors. For a long time after Alex died, we were strong for Stefan and his brother. And then after losing Stefan, it got a little bit, hard to, like, what are we doing, right? And who can we? So we both are of the mindset to kind of give back to people. That's our method of coping, right? That's how we, and we do it pretty much on an individual basis. And that's what really led me to write this. It's not that I think I know everything, but I know some stuff, and I know that some stuff I know people aren't necessarily willing to share, like how executives think and how they make decisions. I've seen it at public companies. I've seen it at private companies. I've seen it at family companies. I've seen it at private equity owned companies. And I want to be able to use that constructively, right? To encourage people. I don't want to discourage people. I want to encourage people. But I also want to be realistic, right? I want to be able to truly encourage people and how to achieve both a balance, success that they're comfortable with. Success is what you're comfortable with. It's not what other people define for you. I was never pursuing money, and I probably made less money because I was never pursuing money. I was pursuing making stuff happen. And that was always in my mind. And I left myself kind of open, right? And I lucked out and I did really well financially. And it wasn't like I didn't, you probably, could find people that would say, well, I think he was after the money. Well, if you're going to be in business, okay, if you're doing it just for the appreciation, you've chosen the wrong thing to do. People aren't going to often say to you, we really appreciate you. What they're going to say to you is, we're going to pay you more, or we're going to give you some stock, or we're going, and that's how my mentality worked. I mean, it was like, okay, I go out here and I go do something and somebody's going to reward me with, money, right? But I didn't think much past that. It was like going to be a reward. And then later I began to be able to control that and kind of think about financing going in. I was always thinking about other people's finances and because I was I was selling money. I was an investment
Right.
banker. So, that's what I thought about. And I knew I would get a piece of that, but I didn't think much beyond that. Um, David Smith told me when later in my career, and he founded not only Sinclair, but his father founded Sinclair, and he would always say that. But he built it,
Yeah.
and he built a massive company in the car dealer business, also incredibly successfully. People don't really focus on that too much, but he owns that aside from Sinclair. He told me, he goes, look, you were a great racehorse, but your job now is to pick racehorses. and he was, you're not here to run the race anymore. You're here to pick racehorses. And then another time, I didn't like, this was usually at times when he was giving me a talking to. David
Right.
was really good about like, okay, you're not going to like this, but here's what we're going to do. Right. And if it was even that long, but another time he told me, he goes, I'm giving you a gift. I'm paying you to think. I'm not paying you to do. I'm paying you to think. And, when I look back on those times, the fact that the things he told me were so meaningful and very rare that he took any time with people. I mean, he wanted me to be successful, and he wanted to give me things. And, you have to be awake to, I wasn't always awake,
Right.
meaning like, what's being said here? It took a couple times sometimes for me to get something. And I think that because I've been on the receiving end of that from him and others, people at Apollo, people at from Brian Brady, from these people that have been in my life, even people who didn't like me said things that helped me. Even people who were my bitterest competitors and rivals helped me. So in ways, and maybe they didn't always know they were helping me, but I learned something. And even people who knew they were my rivals, sometimes they would call you up and they would go, listen, I'm going to help you out here. And it happens. It's the craziest thing. It's like,
Wow.
why is
You
this
don't hear
person?
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People like somebody who you're fighting against is saying, I'm going to help you out here. I'm going to tell you something. And if you do it, if you follow what I say, this is going to work out, right? In a tough situation. And you've got to think about that. Like, is this a trick? Is this real? And, will it work out? And fortunately, I've had a couple of those work out where I could get past, um, you know, my wife would say to me, don't waste negative energy hating somebody who's trying to bring you down. I've had, that's the other thing I would say. My wife, we've been together over 40 years. She's a businesswoman. She was in the broadcast business. We were in business together. But she's kept our household and our finances together. And when I went broke, she had money left, and we had separate estates. And she, bailed me out and stood behind me when I was starting businesses. She worked at NBC and supported me, and so I could start a business. I probably didn't go into that enough in the book. That I haven't written the forward and the acknowledgments yet, so I'm still going to do that. That without her, I couldn't have gotten launched. Without her, just absolute belief in what I stood for and what I could do. So I didn't let you ask many questions.
Well, I got a few more. They're much faster.
Okay, yeah.
uh, but with writing the book, how did it feel to get, all your feelings, knowledge all out on the page?
Like incomplete. I don't feel like I didn't want it to be a memoir. I wanted it to be a business book. So I adhered to a system that I felt I used over the years called GAIN, Go, Assess, Identify, Next. And when I broke down my career, I saw that I had these cycles of development. And in each one of them, I did these four things. I sort of would go, assess, identify, and then I do that for a period of years. I would assess how my progress was, and then I would identify something new. And it might be a project, or it might be a new job, it might be in the same company. And then I would have a next, right? Like a next level. And that's the book. The first chapter is called From the Outhouse to the Penthouse, because one of the things I looked at was like, I grew up with my grandmother in my first 4 years of my life, and she had to potty train me. She didn't have running water in the outhouse. So I was, as a kid, that's what I had. I had an outhouse, a little kid. I remember it clearly. I was scared to death of it and didn't want to go in there. And, I'd look around the room and I would think, I wonder who here has ever had to use an outhouse. I mean, guys go to deer camp and whatever, and they camp out and they use the woods or the outhouse, but they don't do it because they didn't grow up, without running water. And I didn't grow up without running water. Later, when I was reunited with my parents, and we had running water, but long time I went to my grandmother's every summer, and she didn't have running water probably till almost the 70s, and I think I was in middle school or high school by the time she got running water. My uncle put it in for her. And so, yeah, did I feel like I got it all out? No, that's why I write so much on LinkedIn. The stuff I forgot to put in the book, it's stuff I thought about after. It's supplemental. In some cases it's in there, in some cases it's supplemental.
What have you learned from your wife?
Well, first of all, she has an MS in psychology, and she's a trained psychologist. So what I've learned from her is just, so vast. She doesn't treat me like a patient, but she's first of all, that somebody's belief in you can lift you up to a level that she's just the unconditional trusted person in my life. That trust, I've learned, I've learned to behave in a certain way, that I might have been a little aggressive, and she's very much a rule follower. She's very much, she's very thoughtful. But yet she can be incredibly imaginative, and she can be creative, and she can understand where I'm coming from, which, gives me the confidence, has given me the confidence to, go and do things that were extraordinary, above my pay grade, so to speak. The willingness of her to sacrifice when I was not bringing in money, and she went to work every day, and we had kids, and she was pregnant, she went to work, she supported me monetarily in our tough times, and in every tough time along the way. She never wavered through 40. Not that she didn't get mad at me at some point and read me the riot act here and there. She did. And we were even separated at one point. She, was the architect of how we could get back together, and gave me some profound knowledge during that time, right? Of like, hey, you're either going to be my husband, but you're not going to be my friend. I have plenty of real friends. You can be my husband and my love of my life, but we're not going to be friendly. This divorce is not going to be friendly. And so we got back together, and that took a lot of strength, right? And so there, I can't say enough to say the power of somebody like that in your life is incredible. And but somebody who is strong and will also back you up. So, I've learned from that experience that is an important piece of the puzzle.
I know for me, I started in TV in Terre Haute, Indiana as a production assistant, but I always wanted to be a leader. And I know I'm not alone. A lot of people want to be like that. So what advice would you give anyone who wants to follow your footsteps?
Find a place to lead. Been to Terre Haute many times. We race sprint cars and midgets at the fairgrounds with my
Yeah.
youngest son. And so find something to lead. So if you're in a department and there's always things that your boss doesn't want to do, right? And or that his boss doesn't want to do. And if you can do this technically, take responsibility for something. Usually what I did was I found something that kind of nobody really wanted to deal with. And maybe even I wasn't even qualified, but I was willing to take a shot at it. Help, take jobs other people don't want to do them. And that may sound like being a suck up, but it also is like you're learning every step of the way. And then ask people what you can do, like people in cross departments, like, can you help facilitate? Is there some area? Typically, this is communication too. Like there might be friction or lack of communication, and somebody may be saying, "Oh God, the traffic department gives me a hard time every time about this." If you can help fix that problem, you become a leader, and then you become recognized as a leader. Just saying, I want to be the head of production, is one thing. You can always make that known, but I would say to people, just go ahead and lead something. Lead something. Lead fundraising for a charity. Lead something. People will notice.
And
You're leading. You're leading. You started this.
Yes. I know.
Right?
I'm trying. I'm working hard and hopefully get this mission of getting people to tell their stories. Hopefully it continues.
Yeah, I will.
What are some of the things you do to help your own mental health?
Well, that's a good one because I have a coach I've had for 17 years, an executive coach. I had when I had to take a battery of psychological tests for the Apollo job, the psychologist said in the report, which I saw eventually, I'm not sure why he's had to have a coach for 17. At the time, it was 12 years. For 12 years, that may indicate something's wrong here. I thought that was a good thing. Okay, I thought I've got a coach. I'm working on this, and I didn't necessarily stop and think about how other people might see that. They might see that as a deficit. My coach has been absolutely integral. After my wife, she has been, and then my good friend that my horse partner that got me into riding. After Alex died, she said to me, her name is Ann Ellis. She said, I'm going to get you out on a horse, and that will help you. And so we started trail riding together. And she's had horses her whole life. She's incredible. She works at Sinclair and is an SVP there now. And she's like a sister to me. But having people like that in my life that did something extraordinary, knew something, went out of their way, and we, to this day, we still trail ride together, and It's something I wouldn't do if I didn't have her and uh, in my life, because she knows horses, confident, professional rider, and I feel safe, doing it with her. And I like her, and I love her. She's my sister. So, for all practical purposes. And I think that's been instrumental. I don't, people doing those kinds of things. And I've always been a supporter of hers in business and behind her. And, I'm fortunate a number of people, I think I've given off that as I've moved through. I don't feel I've left people in the ditch, certainly intentionally. Sometimes we have a crash and everybody's in the ditch, right? But you try not to, right? As you get older and you start to age out of your career, right, and your aspirations change, then you start looking for something else to do. So taking care of mental health is a process of, like, when I was in the thick of it and I was stressed about accomplishment, it was, so you have to go back in time. After I lost the boys, or after I lost Alex, and then later Stefan, but early on, after losing Alex at a young age, it was easy to just reset and say, this is nothing, right? Business, I can fix this. I can't fix that. I can fix this. And that was a mental health exercise, and keeping Alex always in my mind and in my heart of what he would have wanted for me, right? So mental health, and then not letting depression creep in, about lack of accomplishment, trying to double down on activity. I think when I was just at a loss and didn't know what to do for the next thing, and maybe needed to accomplish something for money, just saying, all right, go do something. Just go do something. Call somebody. Go see somebody. Go, start something and say it out loud. One of the things I do is I say things out loud, and then I feel I have to do it, right? And that's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I started telling people I was going to write a book. Well, then I had to do it, right? And otherwise, they're always going to be saying, like, whatever happened to that book? And then I got to the point where I didn't think I was going to publish it. I didn't think it was good enough. I didn't think anybody would care. And so what do I do for mental health? I go do something. I go, like, and by do something, I mean I move the ball, even if I can move it an inch in a direction that so I said, I want to find a thing I can do after I'm not in the position of being a chairman, or what can I do that will help people who are either mid career, early in their career, late in their career? What do I have up here? What can I share with them openly, that would help them through some kind of situation, even if it's a loss, like of a child, or a spouse, or even a parent. I've experienced all those things, and having that willingness to share that and say, wow, this is, when my mom died, I thought one thing. When my dad died, I thought, holy crap, I got nobody. And then my grandmother was really the blow that came later, because she had, as you read in the book, she stood for a lot for me. She taught me, I think, the core principles that I lived on the rest of my life from 3 years old, 3, 4, and 5 when I lived with her all full time. And then I went with her every summer until I really got a driver's license that, So I lived at her farm every summer, for the next 12 years. And she really formed me into the person underneath. And I didn't know she was doing that. That's who she was. She did it, right? And it was her influence on me that she didn't like try to influence me. She just was this real person. And it really comes down to at key times, sometimes you got to just do it yourself. Sometimes there'll be a person that will listen to you and say something to you. So I think it's important to not go into. My tendency is I'm an introvert, believe it or not, and I tend to go inside. And I have to remember, like, hey, you need to like connect. Now is the time. Like if I'm feeling overly insular or remote, I know it's time. I've got to put myself out there, right? That's the time I need to do that.